r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. What are some weird nsfw historical facts? Some lady got off with a death penalty in ancient Greece by flashing her tits. I remember the case, although not well. If I'm correct, it was her lawyer who laid bare those particular pieces of evidence. Napoleon, in traditional French manner, wrote some steamy love letters to his wife Josephine. They include such phrases, translated as "you're a naughty, gawky, foolish slut and don't bathe. I'm coming home. Don't bathe. I'm coming home." He was talking dirty to his wife. The oldest known objects that were probably sex toys were made out of stone and animal dung. 30k years ago. The oldest known objects that were definitely sex toys were anatomically shaped jade and bronze dildos butt plugs dating back to 3000 years. Animal dung? That doesn't sound like a good idea. Famed comedian Milton Berle was rumored to have an enormous penis. When asked about it by Howard Stern, Milt famously replied, "I'll tell you what. We'll see whose is bigger. You take yours out and I'll only take out enough to win." Did he? Queen Victoria put erotic portraits of herself in Prince Albert's casket. Yes. That means she had someone paint erotic portraits of herself. That fun fact led me down a long Victoria rabbit hole where I read multiple biographies. And she became one of my favorite people in history. She was selfish, immature, insecure, and codependent. But she grows on you after a while. She kept incredibly detailed diaries too. But her daughter Beatrice burned them all. Which is an absolute travesty. She kept incredibly detailed diaries too. But her daughter Beatrice burned them all. Which is an absolute travesty. The 19th century version of delete my internet history when I die? The ancient Greeks and Romans used a plant called silphium as a natural contraceptive. If a woman consumed the resin regularly, she would not get pregnant. If she stopped taking it, though, the effects wore off. From what we can tell, it was almost as effective as modern pharmaceutical birth control. The Romans used it so much that they made it go extinct. We're not even quite sure the exact identity of the plant, i.e. genus and species. The Romans used it so much that they made it go extinct. Nice. Mary Shelley lost her virginity on her mother's grave. This is goth. Lord Byron would keep pubic hair of women he slept with as a souvenir. Now, WTF. To remember you by, my dear. During the Renaissance you could be trialed for sexual incompetence. The jury had to watch. I remember reading about a French noblewoman who wanted to divorce her husband for not getting her off. So a bunch of French nobles gather around in their bedroom. And the dude struts in naked talking mad shit like "I'm fixin' to lay this dong down for days." Then he nuts like 30 seconds later. Russians noble women got themselves professional foot ticklers. They worked full time and were skilled in proper tickling techniques. Foot ticklers. Ptolemy VII of Egypt was married to both his sister and his niece at the same time. Cheating bastard. In a NASA-funded attempt to teach dolphins the English language, a male dolphin lived with a female trainer and was given LSD on multiple occasions as well as being sexually pleasured by the female trainer. The dolphin later killed itself because he was taken from his love, the female trainer. The world was a weird place. What exactly are they expecting the dolphin to say? More handjobs? The Welsh didn't actually have relations with sheep nearly as much as the records show. When Wales joined the United Kingdom, they found a loophole in the laws regarding sheep. If you were caught stealing a sheep, your hand was cut off. If you were caught having relations with a sheep, just your finger was. So lots of sheep thieves just said they were sheep lovers to avoid the harsher punishment. Yeah, I call bullshit. Because I asked a Welsh man how many romantic partners he's had. He started counting and fell asleep. Chinese Empress Wu Zetian forced males to perform oral sex on her as a sign of submission. Chinese Empress Wu Zetian. Well, the next time I see her in nsfw to conduct diplomacy, it'll be awkward at first. But I'll be sure to be a cunning linguist. Romania searches for Scooby-Doo porn more than any other country. Sounds like it's probably one guy who is like really into Scooby porn and is skewing the numbers. Like Spider's Georg. The stethoscope was invented because a doctor was tired of getting embarrassed putting his ear on some tickle bitties to hear heartbeats lungs. Edit. Person below correctly amended that this was in regards to young underage women. Actually, he was uncomfortable doing that with young early teen girls. Which is more reasonable. Edit. For clarity. Benjamin Franklin had a bunch of hoes. He specially liked older ladies because you can bust a nut in them and they won't get pregnant. Willem Dafoe's hog is pretty legendary. When shooting some scenes for Antichrist, Lars von Trier got a stunt double to come in because Dafoe looked so out of proportion on screen he worried people would think he was using a prosthesis on the film instead of the real thing. Kings hired people to watch them have sex. Bravo. Valiant thrusting, your majesty. Albert Einstein ditched his wife to sleep with his cousin. So he really did have a thing for relativity. Egyptian mythology. Atum is an ancient god who masturbated to make all gods and men. There was also god Min who masturbated and Pharaoh have to masturbate and come into Nile as a tradition. Well, that puts a spin on the Kane Chronicles. In the 18th and 19th centuries, animal intestines were used as condoms by young couples. Not exactly the most effective, but they tried. It works better if you take them out of the animal first. Lyndon B. Johnson was really into whipping out his dong, allegedly even slapping it on the table to assert dominance. Gandhi was famously immune to desire. He tested himself by laying naked with young girls. From a migration standpoint, learned through anthropology, Scandinavians are a very separate group from other Europeans. Yet most Europeans will show up as partially Scandinavian in a DNA test. Those Vikings really put the rape and pillage. That young girl was Gandhi's niece. James Joyce was way into his wife's farts. You had an ass full of farts that night, darling. And I ducked them out of you. Big fat fellows. Long windy ones. Quick little merry cracks and a lot of tiny little naughty farters ending in a long gush from your hole. The 8th of December, 1909. In 1899, sitting French President Félix Faure died in the company of his much younger lover, Marguerite Steenheel, which caused an enormous sex scandal in France, which, by itself, is somewhat of an impressive feat. The French rumor mill being what it is. It eventually was suggested that Faure was receiving a blowjob when he had the stroke that killed him, which is somewhat less ironic than it would have been if Steenheel had been stroking him off at the time. But never mind. Later Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau's line has become pretty well known. Il valait être Caesar. Il ne fut Pompey. For non-French speakers, it has a double meaning. Either he wanted to be Caesar, but ended up as Pompey, or he wanted to be Caesar, but ended up being blown. Pomper is a French word meaning to fellat. Occasionally it is reported that Faure died while inside a French prostitute and had to be surgically removed from her. But there's zero actual evidence for this. Instead, we'll just have to make do with blowjob jokes. So there was a female Polish king, Jadwiga. She married a Lithuanian Grand Duke Władysław Jagiello. She must have been a really nice catch, since he had to give up his pagan spouses for her. And one of sources I read long ago said that he had to give up 9 women for her. He basically gave up his own harem just to bang young Polish king. Edit. Yes, she was the king. It's some historical bullshit about being ruler of Poland instead of spouse of ruler of Poland. Wiki link about Jadwiga. See, I feel like it's more about the personal union with Poland for strength, but whatever. A bunch of people on the Lewis and Clark expedition got syphilis. I've seen a bit where archaeologists tracked the expedition's campsites by finding traces of the mercury-based medications the members of the expedition were taking to treat the disease. The Romans were no different with their insults and jokes from us today. This is Graffiti Romans made. Kashga.com or link/blogs history the bawdy graffiti of Pompeii and Herculaneum. It is really freaky how little we as a human race have developed our humor. Ancient Rome was built without the use of construction cones or barriers. Does Osha know about this? In nature, A male presented with multiple receptive sexual partners will show renewed interest for new partners but not for old ones. This effect is named after US President Calvin Coolidge. As the story goes, the President and Mrs. Coolidge were being shown separately around an experimental government farm. When Mrs. Coolidge came to the chicken yard, she noticed that a rooster was mating very frequently. She asked the attendant how often that happened and was told, dozens of times each day. Mrs. Coolidge said, "Tell that to the president when he comes by." Upon being told, the president asked, "Same hen every time?" The reply was, "Oh, no, Mr. President. A different hen every time." President, tell that to Mrs. Coolidge. I feel like this joke is older than Coolidge. Modern racing sports employ hot girls to pose sexy with the winners afterwards. In Roman times, the girl was the prize. Hadrian Caesar had a lover named Antinous, who died at 19ish from drowning. Hadrian was so filled with remorse he deified him. Sounds sweet until you realize Hadrian was 48 and Antinous 13 when it started. I read that as defiled and didn't bat an eye at the concept of a Roman emperor committing necrophilia. Catherine the Great of Russia had a lot of young artist intellectual lovers until her death. My professor who specializes in Russian history describes it as giving a whole new meaning to come to ask me anything. Catherine used romance as a way of advancing her political agenda. Seduce a young prince who is next in line for the throne, only to realize he cares more for toys than you. Nowhere? Nothing a little extramarital deviation won't fix. The king is now threatening you with imprisonment? Seduce the king's guard and overthrow your husband. Mozart has a song called Lick My Ass, K231 Leck mich im Arsch. He also had a poop fetish, NM Wikipedia.org link. The fetish part is still disputed, as much of the family used a lot of scatological humor, and scatological humor was very big in Germany at the time, particularly among the lower classes. My understanding is that most common folk throughout much of history had very meager lodgings, and most families would sleep together both for warmth as well as the simple fact that they didn't have the space for people to sleep separately. If mom and dad were in the mood to procreate, the rest of the family was just there. There was an ancient way to tell if you were pregnant. Plant barley and wheat, I think it was those plants, and piss on them. If they grew, you were pregnant. A more modern one was to pee on a frog, or to send your pee to a lab to be poured on a frog. If the frog ovulated, then you were pregnant. There was a Roman god Hermaphroditus who had both male and female parts, and is where we get the modern word hermaphrodite. Even had a cult, so wasn't a minor god. I was kind of surprised about this because I took Latin for many years in school and was super into Greco-Roman mythology, but had never heard about this god before. Not until I visited the secret room in the Naples Archaeological Museum, which is basically where they put all the rated X stuff they found in Pompeii. So if you want to see some penis lamps, frescoes from a brothel showing sex acts patrons could ask for, and some goat pan sex, definitely go hit it up. So, here's the myth for those interested. Hermaphroditus was, and surprisingly, the son of Hermes Mercury and Aphrodite Venus. He grew up cared for by dryads, and was supposedly very shy and beautiful. One day, at the age of 15, he met the nymph Psalmacis bathing. She fell in love with him, and attempted to seduce him, but only succeeded in making him uncomfortable until he ran off. He went further downstream and decided to bathe, but as he began, Psalmacis ambushed and attempted to rape him. As he tried to get free, Psalmacis called up to the gods, asking them to make sure they remained together as one. The gods responded with their usual twisted sense of humor. So technically speaking, Hermaphroditus is also a nymph named Psalmacis. Anyone mentioned Edward II of England? The king's foppish son in Braveheart, who was infamously not only homosexual, but, what was considered more of a problem, promoted his lovers to high office, and lost a lot of power that his father Edward Longshanks had gained over the Scots. He allegedly met an unpleasant end, having been usurped by his wife and her lover. To avoid leaving marks on the body, and accusations of murder, He was killed by having a horn tube inserted into his rectum and a red hot iron rod thrust through it and generally wiggled about internally. Eater. Row. Didn't expect this to blow up so much. Thought this story was more well known. I should have made it more clear that, as several replies point out, this is just a popular story. And so it's not really a historical fact. The hot iron rod part. Especially. I don't imagine that someone killed in this way would look like they died peacefully in their sleep. Having said that, I don't think they really expected anyone to believe that he wasn't murdered. They just didn't want it to be provable. I think if the church had decided they were guilty, and they were excommunicated, then all the other claimants to the throne could have come and taken it by force. And it would be doing God's work. Although suffocation, starvation, dehydration also wouldn't always look like natural causes either. But there were definitely undetectable poisons available back then. But hey, it was a brutal time. Who needs a reason to kill your enemy in a hideous manner? As for Edward II's sexuality, no idea. It isn't like kings could be openly gay back then. But on the other hand, it was very common for same-sex close friends to be physically affectionate without there being a sexual motive. So again, if I'd known this post wasn't just gonna vanish with a couple of points like most of my comments do, I'd have gone into more detail. Still, it's a good story and does make people shudder and clench colon. Dude. Poison. Poison is a much easier solution. These people really didn't understand how easy it was to poison annoying husbands back then. Ducking like and subscribe.